My 7-year-old asked when his real family is coming to pick him up. I've raised him since birth. I was loading the dishwasher after dinner when Liam walked into the kitchen holding his backpack with both hands like it weighed 50 pounds. He stood in the doorway for a moment before asking the question that made me drop the plate I was rinsing. It shattered in the sink and I just stared at him while soapy water ran over the broken pieces. Mom, when is my real family coming to get me? I've been good. I did all my chores. His voice was small and worried, like he was confessing to something he thought might get him in trouble. I turned off the water with hands that had gone numb. Liam was 7 years old. I'd given birth to him at Northwest Medical Center on October 14th, 2016, at 3:42 in the morning after 19 hours of labor. I had the C-section scar to prove it. I had his birth certificate with my name listed as mother. I had 7 years of photographs, medical records, school enrollment forms, every single document that proved he was mine, and he was asking when his real family was coming to pick him up. I knelt down so I was at his eye level and tried to keep my voice steady. Liam, I'm your real family. I'm your mom. I've always been your mom. Who told you something different? He looked confused and a little scared. Grandma Ruth. She said my real family misses me and they're coming to take me home soon. She said you're nice, but you're not really my mom. She said I shouldn't be sad when they come because it's where I belong. Grandma Ruth, my former mother-in-law. The woman I hadn't allowed near my son in 3 years after she'd told me during our custody battle that I'd never been good enough for her son and wasn't good enough to raise her grandson. The woman who'd lost all custody rights and visitation privileges after she'd tried to take Liam from his daycare, claiming I'd abandoned him. The woman who had a restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of either of us. I'd assumed she'd finally accepted the court's decision and moved on with her life. Apparently, I'd been very wrong. I pulled Liam into a hug and felt him relax against me. When did Grandma Ruth tell you this, buddy? When did you see her? He pulled back and looked up at me with those wide brown eyes that were exactly like mine. She comes to school sometimes, during lunch. She waves at me through the fence and we talk. She's really nice. She brings me candy and tells me stories about my real family. She said they live in a big house and I'll have my own room with toys and a dog. My blood went cold. She'd been approaching him at school, multiple times, regularly enough that it had become routine. How many times has she come to school, Liam? He shrugged. Lots of times. Maybe every week. She said it's our special secret and I shouldn't tell you because you'd be sad that I'm leaving. But I wanted to know when they're coming because I need to pack my stuff. Every week. For how long? I kept my voice calm even though my heart was hammering. Liam, I need you to tell me the truth. This is very important. When did Grandma Ruth start coming to school? When was the first time you saw her? He thought about it, his face scrunched up in concentration. After winter break? When we came back to school in January? She was by the fence and she knew my name and she said she was my grandma and she missed me. She seemed sad, so I talked to her. Was that bad? Am I in trouble? January. It was now late March. That meant Ruth had been approaching my son for almost 3 months without my knowledge. 3 months of telling him I wasn't his real mother. 3 months of undermining everything I'd built as his parent. 3 months of violating a restraining order and potentially traumatizing my child. I pulled him close again. You're not in trouble at all, baby. You didn't do anything wrong, but I need you to know something very important. I am your real mom. I will always be your real mom. Grandma Ruth is confused and she's saying things that aren't true. You're not going anywhere. This is your home and I'm your family. Okay? He nodded against my shoulder, but I could tell he was still uncertain. Ruth's voice had been in his head for 3 months. My reassurance wasn't going to undo that damage in one conversation. After I got Liam settled in front of the TV with his favorite show, I went into my bedroom and closed the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called the school first. The after-hours line went to voicemail, so I left a message marking it urgent. A woman I'd explicitly told them was not allowed near my son had been making regular contact with him during lunch. I wanted an emergency meeting with the principal first thing Monday morning. Then I called my lawyer, Monica Shaw. She'd handled my divorce from David and the subsequent custody battle with Ruth. Monica answered on the third ring, sounding like she'd been in the middle of dinner. Allison, what's wrong? I explained everything Liam had told me. Monica was silent for a long moment after I finished. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She's trying to build a case for parental alienation, or worse, she's trying to condition Liam to go willingly if she attempts another abduction. This is extremely serious, Allison. We need to document everything immediately and file for an emergency protective order expansion. Monica walked me through what I needed to do. First, record a conversation with Liam where he repeated what Ruth had told him, but do it naturally without leading questions. She explained how to set up my phone to record video discreetly. Second, contact the school in writing via email so there was documentation of my complaint. Third, file a police report about the restraining order violations. Fourth, request security footage from the school showing Ruth's presence on campus. Monica said she'd start drafting an emergency motion to file Monday morning requesting criminal charges against Ruth for violating the protective order and potential kidnapping conspiracy charges. Allison, I need you to understand something. Ruth is escalating. The fact that she's been doing this for months means she's planning something. People don't invest this kind of time grooming a child unless they intend to act. You need to be hypervigilant this weekend. Don't let Liam out of your sight. I thanked her and hung up feeling sick. I'd thought the worst was behind us. I'd thought Ruth had finally accepted that she'd lost and moved on. Instead, she'd been quietly, methodically poisoning my son's mind for months while I was completely oblivious. I went back to the living room where Liam was watching cartoons. I sat down next to him and pulled out my phone, opening the voice recorder app discreetly. Hey buddy, I want to talk a little more about Grandma Ruth. Can you tell me again what she said about your real family? I want to make sure I understand. Liam turned away from the TV and launched into a detailed explanation that broke my heart. According to Ruth, Liam's real parents were wonderful people who'd been searching for him for years. They lived in a big house in the country with horses and dogs. They had a room already decorated for him with all his favorite colors and toys. They thought about him every single day and couldn't wait to bring him home. Ruth had told him that I was a nice lady who'd been taking care of him temporarily, but that I always knew he'd eventually go back to his real family. She told him I'd be happy for him when they came to get him because I'd want him to be with people who could give him a better life. Every word was calculated to make Liam believe his departure was inevitable and that I'd endorsed it. Ruth had created an entire fantasy world where Liam was wanted by some perfect family and I was just a placeholder. She'd even preemptively framed my resistance as selfishness. And Grandma Ruth said she's going to help you go to this family? I asked carefully. Liam nodded enthusiastically. She said soon they're going to have everything ready and she'll come pick me up from school and take me to them. She said it might happen any day now, so I should be ready. That's why I asked when they're coming. I don't want to miss it. She was planning an abduction. Ruth was telling Liam that she'd pick him up from school and take him to his real family, so that when it happened, he'd go willingly. He wouldn't scream or resist or tell his teachers something was wrong. He'd think it was the natural next step in a process his own mother had agreed to. I stopped the recording and pulled Liam close again. Listen to me very carefully. Grandma Ruth is not allowed to pick you up from school. She's not allowed to be near you at all. If she tries to take you anywhere, you need to scream and run to a teacher immediately. Do you understand? She's not safe. Liam's face crumpled. But she's nice. She gives me candy and she says nice things. Why isn't she safe? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his grandmother is trying to kidnap him? That the woman who'd been bringing him treats and telling him stories was actually grooming him for abduction? I did my best to explain that sometimes people say nice things but have bad intentions. That Grandma Ruth was confused and wasn't thinking clearly. That she'd lost the privilege of seeing him because she'd made bad choices. Liam listened, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Ruth had spent 3 months building trust. I was asking him to overturn that in one evening. After Liam went to bed, I stayed up late documenting everything I could remember from our conversations. I wrote down exact quotes as best I could recall them. I made a timeline of when the contact started and how frequently it had occurred. I searched through Liam's backpack and found 3 candy wrappers tucked into a side pocket and a small toy car I didn't recognize. Evidence of Ruth's gifts. I photographed everything and sent it to Monica with a detailed email summary. Then I barely slept. Every sound made me bolt upright, thinking Ruth was trying to break into the house. I checked the locks 4 times. I kept my phone next to my pillow with 911 pre-dialed, ready to hit call at the first sign of trouble. Monday morning, I drove Liam to school myself instead of letting him take the bus. I walked him into the building and went directly to the principal's office. Principal Donna Fletcher was a woman in her late 50s who'd been running Riverside Elementary for 15 years. She looked alarmed when I appeared at her door before the first bell had rung. Mrs. Hayes, I got your voicemail. Please, come in. I sat down across from her desk and laid out the situation. Liam's grandmother, who had a restraining order preventing contact, had been approaching him regularly during lunch for the past 3 months. She'd been feeding him a story about being taken to his real family and was potentially planning an abduction. I needed to see security footage immediately, and I needed to know why no teacher or lunch monitor had noticed an unauthorized adult making regular contact with a student. Principal Fletcher's face went from concerned to horrified as I talked. She pulled up the school's security system on her computer and started scrolling through footage from the lunch periods over the past few weeks. It took 20 minutes, but we found it. Clear video of Ruth standing at the chain-link fence that bordered the playground, leaning down to talk to Liam through the gaps. The footage showed Liam running over to the fence when he saw her, showed them talking for several minutes, showed Ruth passing candy and small toys through the fence, showed this happening again and again on different dates. Principal Fletcher looked sick. How did no one see this? How did our staff miss this? I was furious, but trying to stay professional. That's what I need you to tell me, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your lunch monitors were negligent and my son has been groomed for abduction right under your supervision. Principal Fletcher stammered an apology and promised a full investigation. She said she'd speak to every lunch monitor and review protocols immediately. She'd also make sure every staff member had Ruth's photo and understood she was banned from campus. I told her that wasn't good enough. I wanted a dedicated aide assigned to Liam during lunch and recess. Someone whose only job was to monitor him and ensure no unauthorized contact occurred. I wanted written confirmation that the school understood the severity of the situation and the liability they faced if Ruth succeeded in abducting my son because of their negligence. Principal Fletcher agreed to everything immediately. She also offered to coordinate with law enforcement to increase security around the school. After the meeting with Principal Fletcher, I went directly to the police station and filed a formal report. The officer who took my statement was a detective named Raymond Kowalski, a man in his 40s with 20 years on the force who specialized in domestic cases. He listened to everything, reviewed the school security footage I'd gotten Principal Fletcher to download for me, and took notes in a thick black binder. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to be straight with you. What we have here is clear and repeated violation of a restraining order with evidence of potential kidnapping conspiracy. The fact that she's been conditioning your son to go willingly is actually a more serious aggravating factor. I'm going to recommend we bring charges immediately and request a warrant for her arrest." Relief flooded through me, but Detective Kowalski wasn't finished. "However, I need to warn you that cases like this can get complicated fast. Ruth will likely claim she was just trying to see her grandson and didn't understand the restraining order terms. She'll paint herself as a heartbroken grandmother. Her lawyer will make you look like you're being vindictive. This might get ugly before it gets better." I told him I understood, and that I was prepared to do whatever was necessary to keep my son safe. Detective Kowalski worked quickly. By Tuesday afternoon, an arrest warrant had been issued for Ruth Hayes on charges of multiple counts of violating a protective order and attempted custodial interference. Officers were dispatched to her home to execute the warrant. She wasn't there. Her neighbors said they hadn't seen her in several days. Her car was gone. She'd apparently left town. Detective Kowalski called me with the update, and his voice was tense. "Mrs. Hayes, I don't want to alarm you unnecessarily, but Ruth's disappearance is concerning. It's possible she realized we were closing in and fled. It's also possible she's preparing to make her move on Liam. I'm recommending you keep him home from school for the rest of the week while we locate her. I'm also recommending you stay with family or friends rather than at your home, somewhere Ruth doesn't know about." The idea that Ruth might be planning to grab Liam right now, this week, made my whole body go cold. I called my sister Emily, who lived 40 minutes away in a different town. I explained what was happening and asked if Liam and I could stay with her for a few days. Emily didn't hesitate. "Pack a bag and get over here right now. You're not going through this alone." I picked Liam up from school early, telling the office we had a family emergency. On the drive to Emily's house, Liam asked why we weren't going home. I told him we were having a special sleepover with Aunt Emily and his cousins for a few days. He seemed excited about that and didn't push for more details. Emily's house was chaos when we arrived. She had 3 kids under 10 and the noise level was intense, but it felt safe. Her husband Greg was a former Marine who took the situation seriously. He checked all the locks, set up a security camera system he'd been meaning to install for months, and made it clear that Ruth would have to go through him if she wanted to get to Liam. That night, after the kids were asleep, Emily and I sat in her kitchen drinking wine while I told her everything. She was furious on my behalf, but also practical. "You need to prepare for the possibility that this goes to trial, that Ruth fights the charges and drags this out. You need documentation of everything. Every conversation, every legal filing, every interaction with Liam about what she told him. You need to be airtight." She was right. I started a detailed log that night, writing down every date, time, and detail I could remember. I also started researching parental alienation and how it was addressed in court. Wednesday morning, Detective Kowalski called with news that made my heart stop. Ruth had been located. She'd been staying in a motel 2 towns over under a fake name, but had used her credit card for gas, which had pinged in the system. When officers arrived to arrest her, they'd found concerning items in her motel room. A child's suitcase already packed with boys' clothes in Liam's size. A folder containing photographs of Liam from his school's website. A handwritten timeline showing Liam's school schedule, dismissal times, and the routes I typically drove. Maps with our house and the school circled. Most disturbing, a notarized letter claiming Ruth had been granted emergency custody due to my unfitness as a parent. The letter was completely fabricated but looked official enough that it might have fooled school staff or even police officers who didn't look too closely. Ruth had been planning a sophisticated abduction. She'd intended to grab Liam, probably from school, present the fake custody letter if challenged, and disappear with him before I even knew he was missing. If she'd succeeded, she could have been states away before I realized what happened. The evidence Detective Kowalski described made it clear this wasn't a grandmother missing her grandson. This was a calculated kidnapping conspiracy. Ruth was arrested and held on $500,000 bail, which she couldn't afford to post. She'd be staying in custody until trial. Monica filed emergency motions to permanently terminate any potential future visitation rights and to request a psychological evaluation of Ruth before any future custody discussions could even be considered. The district attorney assigned to the case, a woman named Victoria Cross with a reputation for being aggressive in child endangerment cases, reached out to me directly. She wanted to meet to discuss the charges and prepare for trial. I met with DA Cross in her office Thursday afternoon. She was in her early 40s, sharply dressed, with a wall full of commendations behind her desk. She shook my hand firmly and got right to business. "Mrs. Hayes, I want you to understand that we're taking this case very seriously. What Ruth Hayes did goes far beyond a grandmother overstepping boundaries. This was systematic grooming of a minor child in preparation for kidnapping. The fake custody documents elevate this to a felony. We're looking at multiple years of prison time if convicted. She walked me through what the trial would look like. I'd have to testify. Liam might have to testify or at least be interviewed by a forensic specialist. Ruth's defense would try to paint her as a concerned grandmother who'd been wrongly separated from her family. DA Cross warned me that Ruth's lawyer would likely try to bring up my divorce from David, suggesting I'd alienated Liam from his father's family. They'd try to flip the narrative and make me the villain. But here's what they can't explain away, DA Cross said, pulling out a folder. The restraining order that was granted after Ruth attempted to take Liam from daycare, the school security footage showing repeated violations, the motel room full of kidnapping materials, the fake custody letter, the timeline she created tracking your son's movements. This isn't gray area. This is a woman who planned to steal a child. I asked if there was any chance Ruth would take a plea deal. DA Cross smiled grimly. Her lawyer has already reached out about that possibility, but I'm not interested in a deal that lets her off easy. I want her to face the consequences of what she did. However, if she's willing to plead guilty to the felony charges in exchange for a sentence recommendation, I might consider it. That would spare Liam from having to testify. Over the next 2 weeks, Ruth's lawyer tried multiple angles to get the charges reduced. They claimed Ruth had dementia and didn't understand what she was doing. Medical evaluations proved that was false. They claimed the restraining order had never been properly served. Documentation proved otherwise. They claimed Ruth had genuinely believed she was acting in Liam's best interest. The fake custody documents and detailed abduction planning proved that argument was nonsense. Finally, Ruth's lawyer came back with a plea offer. Ruth would plead guilty to felony attempted custodial interference and multiple counts of restraining order violation in exchange for a recommended sentence of 4 years with possibility of parole after 2. DA Cross asked what I thought. Part of me wanted Ruth to face the maximum possible sentence, to spend the rest of her life in prison for trying to steal my son. But another part of me wanted this over. Wanted Liam to not have to testify and relive the trauma. Wanted to move forward with our lives without this hanging over us. I told DA Cross I'd agree to the plea deal if it included a permanent no-contact order that extended to Liam for the rest of Ruth's life. No letters, no phone calls, no third-party contact. Complete severance. DA Cross said she'd make that a condition of the deal. The plea hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I had to deal with the aftermath in Liam's life. I'd taken him to see a child psychologist named Dr. Angela Warren who specialized in trauma and parental manipulation. Dr. Warren was in her 50s with a gentle demeanor that put Liam at ease immediately. She used play therapy and art to help him process what had happened. In their third session, Liam drew a picture that made Dr. Warren call me in. It showed a house with 2 people inside labeled Liam and Mom. Outside the house was another figure labeled Grandma Ruth, with a large X over it. At the bottom, Liam had written in his careful 7-year-old handwriting, "I am home." Dr. Warren explained that Liam was processing the idea that he'd been lied to, that Ruth's promise of a real family had been false, that where he'd been all along was exactly where he belonged. He's grieving the fantasy she created, Dr. Warren said. Even though it was fake, part of him had started to believe it and even look forward to it. Now he has to accept that it was never real. That's a complicated loss for a child to process. She recommended continued therapy twice a week for the next several months. I agreed to whatever Liam needed. The plea hearing arrived on a gray Tuesday morning in late April. I sat in the courtroom with Monica on one side and Emily on the other for support. Ruth was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than I remembered. She didn't look at me. The judge, an older woman named Barbara Chen, reviewed the plea agreement and asked Ruth a series of questions to confirm she understood what she was agreeing to. Did she understand she was pleading guilty to felony charges? Yes. Did she understand she was facing 4 years in prison? Yes. Did she understand she was accepting a permanent no-contact order regarding her grandson? Ruth hesitated on that one. Her voice broke when she finally said yes. Then it was time for victim impact statements. DA Cross had prepared me for this. I'd written a statement that I'd read aloud to the court explaining the harm Ruth had caused. I stood up and walked to the podium with shaking hands. I looked at the judge, refusing to look at Ruth, and began reading. I explained how Ruth's manipulation had made my 7-year-old son question his entire reality, how he'd asked when his real family was coming because he'd been convinced I was temporary, how he'd been groomed to go willingly with a woman who planned to kidnap him. I explained the fear I'd felt when I realized someone had been regularly accessing my child on school property without my knowledge, the violation of discovering security footage showing Ruth passing items through a fence to Liam, the terror of learning she'd been preparing for abduction with fake custody documents and detailed surveillance of our daily routines. I explained the therapy Liam now needed, the nightmares he'd started having about being taken away, the constant questions about whether I was really his mom and whether he was really staying with me forever, the regression in his behavior at school, the way he'd started clinging to me and panicking when I was out of sight. I explained that Ruth hadn't just violated a restraining order or made a series of bad decisions. She'd weaponized a child's trust and innocence to serve her own desires. She'd been willing to traumatize her own grandson permanently in order to possess him. That wasn't love. That was ownership. That was control. When I finished, my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the podium to stay steady. The courtroom was silent. Judge Chen looked at Ruth with undisguised disgust. Mrs. Hayes, do you have anything you'd like to say before I accept this plea agreement? Ruth's lawyer stood and whispered urgently to her. She shook her head and stood up on her own. When she spoke, her voice was thin and defensive. I only wanted to see my grandson. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just missed him so much and I thought he needed me. I thought I could give him a better life. I didn't understand I was doing anything wrong. Judge Chen cut her off. You didn't understand that violating a restraining order was wrong? You didn't understand that creating fake custody documents was wrong? You didn't understand that planning to abduct a child was wrong? Mrs. Hayes, you spent 3 months systematically manipulating a 7-year-old child. You told him his mother wasn't really his mother. You created an elaborate fantasy designed to make him go willingly when you kidnapped him. You surveilled his schedule and movements. You packed a suitcase for him. Those are not the actions of someone who doesn't understand right from wrong. Those are the actions of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and didn't care about the consequences. The judge accepted the plea agreement and sentenced Ruth to 4 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after serving 2 years. The no-contact order was made permanent and enforceable for the rest of Ruth's life. As Ruth was led out of the courtroom, she finally looked at me. Her eyes were full of tears and what might have been regret. Or it might have been anger at being caught. I didn't care which. She'd lost and I'd won. More importantly, Liam was safe. Outside the courthouse, Monica hugged me. It's over. You can move forward now. D.A. Cross shook my hand and said if I ever needed anything related to the case, or if Ruth violated the no-contact order in the future, to call her directly. Emily drove me home and helped me start the process of reclaiming normalcy. That evening, I picked Liam up from school and we went out for ice cream. He got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles and ate it happily while telling me about his day. He didn't ask about his real family. He didn't ask when someone was coming to pick him up. He just was a 7-year-old kid eating ice cream with his mom. Later, when I was tucking him into bed, he looked up at me with those brown eyes and asked, Mom, am I staying here forever? Like really forever? I kissed his forehead and pulled his blanket up to his chin. Yes, baby. Really forever. This is your home and I'm your mom and nothing is ever going to change that. 3 months after the plea hearing, things had settled into a new normal. Liam was doing well in therapy. Dr. Warren said he'd made remarkable progress in processing what had happened and rebuilding his sense of security. His nightmares had decreased. He'd stopped constantly asking for reassurance that I was really his mother and he was really staying. He'd started talking about the future again, making plans for his birthday party in October and asking about summer camp. The school had implemented new security protocols after the incident with Ruth. Lunch monitors now did regular perimeter checks. All staff had photos of individuals who were banned from campus. Parents had been notified about safety procedures. Principal Fletcher had personally apologized to me twice more and the school had offered to cover the cost of Liam's therapy as acknowledgement of their failure to protect him. I'd accepted. My relationship with David, Liam's father, had been complicated by all of this. David lived 3 states away and saw Liam 1 weekend a month and during summer breaks. When I told him what his mother had done, he'd been horrified and immediately cut off contact with Ruth. He'd provided a statement to police supporting my account and making clear he'd had no knowledge of Ruth's actions. David had apologized repeatedly for his mother's behavior and had increased his child support payments without being asked, saying he wanted to help cover therapy costs and security upgrades for our home. He'd started calling Liam more frequently, making sure to reinforce that Mom meant me and that I'd always be his mother and he'd always be with me. It hadn't fixed our co-parenting relationship entirely, but it had improved it significantly. As for me, I was still processing everything. I'd started my own therapy to deal with the fear and violation I'd felt, to work through the guilt of not noticing what was happening sooner, to address the hypervigilance that made me check the locks 5 times every night and panic when Liam was out of my sight for more than a few minutes. Dr. Warren had referred me to a colleague, Dr. Marcus Klein, who specialized in trauma for parents of victimized children. He'd helped me understand that I hadn't failed as a parent, that Ruth had been sophisticated in her manipulation, and any parent would have struggled to detect what she was doing. That healing would take time, and I needed to be patient with myself. One Saturday morning in late July, Liam and I were making pancakes when he said something that made me stop mid-flip. Mom, I'm glad Grandma Ruth was lying about the other family. I like our family. Just us. It's better. I looked down at him standing on his step stool next to me at the stove, carefully pouring batter into the pan. Yeah? Why's that? He shrugged. Because you're my real mom and this is my real home and I don't want a different one, even if they had horses. I set down the spatula and hugged him, this little boy who'd been through so much and come out the other side still trusting and loving and brave. I'm glad too, buddy. I'm so glad. That afternoon, we went to the park and Liam ran around with other kids while I sat on a bench watching him. He was laughing and playing and being a normal 7-year-old kid. No fear, no confusion, no wondering where he belonged, just joy. Ruth had tried to steal that from him, had tried to steal him from me, but she'd failed. Justice had been served. Liam was safe. We'd survived. As I watched my son play, I thought about everything we'd been through. The horror of that first conversation when he'd asked about his real family. the investigation and documentation and court proceedings, the fear and anger and desperate need to protect him, the relief when Ruth had been arrested and sentenced, the long, slow process of helping Liam heal. It had been the worst few months of my life. But sitting there in the sunshine watching Liam play, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. We'd come through the fire and we were okay. Better than okay. We were strong. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "How's my favorite sister and nephew doing today?" I smiled and typed back. "We're good, really good." And we were. Ruth Hayes tried to convince my 7-year-old son that I wasn't his real mother and that his real family was coming to take him away. She spent 3 months grooming him for abduction while violating a restraining order and planning a sophisticated kidnapping. She created fake custody documents, surveilled our daily routines, and packed a suitcase ready for the day she'd steal him from school. She was caught. She was prosecuted. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison with a permanent no-contact order. She lost. We won. Liam knows who his real mother is. He knows where his real home is, and he's never leaving it. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.